Well, good evening. I am Angela Barlow, Dean of the Graduate School, and I'm so thrilled that you all are here with me this evening for graduate student orientation. I have a couple of folks on the panel with me, Megan and John Scott, and we'll talk a little bit more about who they are later in our orientation. But before we get started, I just want to say that we do have a Q&A feature. So during the presentation, if you have questions, feel free to use Q&A. And then we will have time at the end to be able to go through and answer some or hopefully all of your questions. So let's go ahead and get started. So the purpose for this particular orientation, I know a lot of you have program orientations and so forth, but my goal with this general orientation for new graduate students is to think about things that we knew to be true when we were undergraduates, and think about how those things may or may not also be true now that we're graduate students. And really the goal of all of this is to support you as a graduate student in being successful in your graduate studies at UCA, because our ultimate goal is to get you in and get you out. We want to see you graduate. So for tonight, my overview, I will go through some scenarios to demonstrate what I think are the top 5 differences that we see between undergraduate and graduate school. I will have one tip for you, one note, so one thing to note, and then we're going to talk a little bit about our graduate student support GAs and some well-being ideas that they'll have to share with you all. The goal of all of this is to bring awareness to these things. So I'm going to share some scenarios, and they're real. I've changed the names. I've tweaked the circumstances a little bit perhaps, but these are real scenarios for students that have cropped up in the past. My intent is not to scare you. My intent is to bring awareness, because that is what will help us all to avoid those situations and to be successful as we move through our graduate studies. So to get started, the top 5 differences, I'll be going through 3 grad school scenarios. And the first one is titled, Will She Graduate? So here's my scenario. I have Maria, and she has applied to graduate this semester. So she's at the end and she's planning to graduate. Her degree works audit, and we'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes about degree works, but basically that's our system that allows us to see that you've met or not met the requirements to graduate. So her audit in that system showed that her cumulative graduate GPA was a 2.552, and her graduate program GPA was above a 3.0. And so the question is, will she graduate? So given these circumstances, is Maria going to graduate? Now, sometimes tonight I'll use a poll, but for this one, just think in your mind, do you think she's going to graduate or not? And so the question, will she graduate? The answer is no. So what's going on here? The issue is that you must have a 3.0 overall graduate GPA and a 3.0 major GPA in order to graduate. So to avoid this scenario, there's some things that you can do. Number one is to not take classes that are not on your degree plan. So when a person's major GPA and their overall graduate GPA are not the same, that tells me that either they have completed another graduate program at some point, which is fine. But a lot of times it means that for some reason they're taking classes that are not on their degree plan, and those classes count regardless. So it's best to stick to the classes that are required. Another piece to this is to monitor your major GPA. And I'll show you in a few minutes how when you're in degree works, you can see both the overall GPA and the major GPA, and you have to think about both of those. And this third bullet I put on here, which is really important, and this one pops up a lot, is like if you withdraw from a class, and that's fine if you do, but make sure that you actually withdrew. Like I can't count how many times I've had someone contact me, a year or 2 later, and they said, because they have an F on their transcript, and they'll say, well, I thought I withdrew. And there's really nothing I can do at that point. So they have an F, and that's messing up their GPA. So again, monitoring things will help, and confirming if you withdraw that you actually withdrew. And anytime you have questions around those things, you can always talk to your advisor, or you can certainly call the graduate school to see if your withdrawal was processed. But this, my friends, is what I would say is the first difference that anyone in graduate school should be aware of. And that's this need to have a 3.0, both overall graduate GPA and in your major or in your degree plan. I'm emphasizing overall graduate GPA because your undergraduate GPA is not considered in this. So it's just looking at your graduate classes. All right, here's our second one. So this scenario is titled, "Is this a possibility?" And I am going to, I believe, yes, ask a poll for this one. So this is Jamie, and Jamie started his master's program in 2013. And at that time, he took 9 of the 10 classes he needed, and then he left school in 2014. So this was probably well, it is a master's program, it says that, but it's probably a 30-hour program. He had 27 of those hours completed, and then he left for whatever reason. Life happens. He decided to return to graduate school this year, and he's thinking that he can take that last class and graduate. So the question is this a possibility? So let me pull this poll up and get y'all's opinion on this. So you should see the poll, and you can answer yes, he's going to come back, take that class and graduate. No, he's not. Or you can say, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm so excited. We've got over 250 people in the room tonight. This is really cool. All right, our numbers are getting up there. We got 80% that have responded. I'll give y'all just a few more seconds. Oh, we hit 90. Come on, we're getting close to 100%. All right, it seems like we paused. Okay, so we got 92% response. Let me end the poll and I'll show y'all just real quick. So we've got, quite a few that said yes. The majority have said no. And then we've got some that are not sure, and it's fine to be not sure at this moment. So let's see what happens in this scenario. And again, these things are real things that have happened to people. So what happened to Jamie? So is it a possibility? The answer is no. So our majority of our folks were correct that Jamie's not going to be able to just step right in and take that last class and graduate. So let's see what's happening. Well, in that scenario, basically Jamie came in and had to start over. I might have been willing to listen to an argument about counting maybe 1 or class, maybe 2 at the most, but basically Jamie has to start over. And the reason being is that there are time limits associated with the different degrees. For a master's degree, you have 6 years. For an EDS degree, it's 6 years, and for a doctorate, it's 10 years. And although that sounds like a lot of time, that time flies by. And you can ask any doctoral student who in their 10th year is panicking because they haven't finished yet. So think about that as you're making decisions regarding the pacing of your degree, or if you have to step away, it's important to think about, okay, how much time do I have left? We do have like a leave policy. Right now it's called a leave policy. I'm hoping to change that this fall to stop out policy. So if there are circumstances where you need to stop your clock, we can do that. Now, not just your average, I need to take a break is an excuse, but particularly if you are in the military, we're going to ask you to do that stop out policy. If you're having medical problems, family issues and things that are about to happen, you can use that policy and seek approval to stop your clock for up to a year. But in general, be mindful of these time limits because they do happen. And then what happens is you start losing those classes that you took early on, and you have to retake those. So this, my friends, is difference number 2. So at the undergraduate level, they count old classes all the time. You come back and you're just trying to finish it out. All the old stuff counts. That's not true at the graduate level. So be aware of these time limits as you're progressing through your program. So this is my third scenario that I have. It's titled, "Is it possible for her to graduate?" And there's actually going to be like a couple of more versions of it, like we're going to build on this scenario. So let's see what's happening here, and I'll do a poll in just a second. So the scenario is Fran, and she's in a 30-hour master's program, and she's made B's in all of her classes, right? So she's been keeping that 3.0 all the way through. And then she gets down to her last class, and she had an incomplete. And then she didn't take care of business, and so that incomplete turned into an F. And so the question for you all is to consider, will she be able to graduate? So let me launch this poll. And let's see what y'all think about Fran's situation. And just like before, we have yes, no, and then not sure. So the votes are coming in. We're up to almost 80%. Getting close to 90%. All right, we're almost there. Okay, so I'll close our poll. And here we go. So this one, overwhelmingly, people are saying no, that she's not going to graduate. And we have a few that said not sure and a few that said yes. So let's see what's happening with this particular situation. So I want to show y'all, this is just a quick spreadsheet I created that shows the grades. So over here on the left, you can see all the B's and the F. And so right now the GPA is a 2.7. So as a graduate student, of course, she will need to she can retake that class. So let's say she retook it, she made an A, and then she took another class, she made an A. And so her GPA is now up to a 2.91. Or 2.92 if we round off, which in the graduate school, we round to the hundredths place. So she's got a 2.92, and she's doing great because she's made some A's. Is she going to be able to graduate though? And the answer to that question, my friends, is no. And so here's what's happening. First of all, the incomplete turned into an F. And I think we've talked a little bit about the importance of like taking care of business, all that stuff. The 3.0 is required to graduate. We said that, and we see that she doesn't have the 3.0 yet. So she's taken a couple of classes and made A's. She's not there. But here's the kicker. In graduate school, you only are allowed 6 credit hours beyond the degree's requirements for improving your GPA. So as an undergraduate, you could continue taking classes until you got your GPA up and then graduate. But as a graduate student, you're only allowed 6 credit hours. And we saw before that wasn't enough. So Fran's not going to graduate. So to avoid this scenario, here's some ideas there. Complete all your work on time. So those incompletes are really only intended for use when you've done everything and you get down to the end of the semester and something happens. So as soon as you can, and you stay in touch with your faculty member, get that work done, meet those deadlines. Typically, you have to finish your incomplete work the next semester, okay? And that's that second bullet. If you get the I, complete it as soon as possible. And then the third bullet is to withdraw rather than receive a bad grade. Now, I don't want to say just go crazy and start withdrawing, because if you have a whole bunch of withdrawals, that's going to bring up other issues, particularly if you're relying on financial aid. Financial aid will monitor how many withdrawals you have. And if you have a ratio, I forget what the ratio is, where you've withdrawn more, too many classes and you're not completing successfully, you will become financial aid ineligible. So, don't go all willy-nilly and start withdrawing all the time. But, do know that there's a reason that the withdrawal date here at ECA is so late in the semester, so that you have a clear picture of what's happening and you can withdraw rather than have that bad grade. So this part is the difference number 3. Remember I said there would be 5 differences. This is difference number 3, that if you find yourself, you've taken all your classes and you don't have that GPA yet to graduate, then you have a maximum of 6 credit hours for improving your GPA. All right. So remember I told you we're going to continue on with Fran's scenario to see what's happening. So Fran wrote a letter to the graduate dean, that's me, explaining that she had retaken the class in which she received the F. And she requested that the grade forgiveness policy be applied so that she could graduate. So, by grade forgiveness, I mean that, she had an F, she retakes it, she gets an A. And so the F eventually basically like disappears. So it's gone and it's not being factored into her GPA. That's grade forgiveness. So does the grade forgiveness policy apply in this particular scenario? I'm not going to launch a poll now, but you can just think in your head whether you think that's a yes or a no. And so the answer to that question is no. So what's happening here? There is no grade forgiveness at the graduate level. So, as an undergraduate, you may have utilized the grade forgiveness policy. I have a student, my son's in school somewhere, and I mean, I know where he is. I'm just not saying where he is, but he's out in school and he has done some classes that weren't that great. And so the grade forgiveness policy has kicked in and helped him as an undergraduate. But in graduate school, we don't have that. So to avoid this scenario, and these are the same 3 bullets I had before: complete your work on time. If you have an I, complete the work as soon as possible and withdraw rather than receive a bad grade. The other thing I'd add to this as well is too, that probably should be the 4th bullet on this list, is talk to your faculty. Like, they want to see you succeed. And I can't tell y'all how many conversations that I have with students that end up with, well, what should you have done? Oh, I should have talked to my faculty member. So talk to your faculty, talk to your instructors, particularly when you feel yourself maybe falling behind. And that is difference number 4, that there's no grade forgiveness policy. So we have one more. All right, so we'll do a poll for this one. So Fran learned that there's no grade forgiveness policy. And so then she said, well, I guess there's no way for me to finish this degree. And she decided to switch programs and pursue a different graduate degree. So at UCA. So the question is, can Fran switch programs? So just really quickly, I want to get your thoughts on whether Fran can switch programs. So the votes are coming in. We're up to about 80, almost 80% response. Give y'all a few more seconds. Ooh, this one, we almost have a tie. Come on, people, vote. We're at a tie right now. Okay, a few more seconds. All right, I'll end the poll, and we are tied. We've got 35, well, we look at the percents, they're tied. So we've got 35% that said yes, 35% that said no, and 30% that are not sure. I'm actually glad to see more people saying they're not sure, because that's communicating, okay, I don't know everything and I need to ask questions, and that's important, asking questions. If we look at the raw numbers though, the no people took the lead. So let me get this off my screen. All right, so let's see what's happening here. So can Fran switch programs? The answer to that, my friends, is no. So all those people that said no were correct. Here's what's happening. At the graduate level, there is no such thing as switching programs. If somebody tells you they switched programs, they're not being completely accurate. Now, you can go into a different program, but you don't just fill out a form like you're changing your major. You have to apply to that program. You have to pay the application fee. You have to submit all the things that that program requires. And the problem that Fran is going to come up on is that when she applies to that new program, that her GPA is going to prevent her from meeting the admission requirements, because that admission requirement is going to say that you have at least a 3.0 on all your previous graduate coursework, and she doesn't have that. So she's not going to be able to be admitted. So, to avoid this scenario, it's the same stuff, right? Like, stay on top, complete your work as soon as you can. If you get the incomplete, withdraw rather than receive a bad grade. Talk to your faculty and your instructors, because this piece to it, where's my little, so this piece is you can't switch programs. Said differently, to change programs, you must apply to a new program and meet all of its admission requirements. And that is the 5th difference that we see at the graduate school level. And I have a lot of students that end up they bump up against that policy. So to summarize, those are my 5 big differences. And remember, as questions are coming to you about this, you can put them in the Q&A. These seem like, I don't know, like orientation should be exciting. And this is not necessarily exciting, but this is so important. And it's this idea of bringing awareness so that you're aware of these things, so that you don't find yourself, in my office asking for some type of exception and saying you didn't know that that was the case. Okay. All right. So, even though I've told all these bad scenarios for these 3 poor people, we have lots of people that graduate, y'all. These are just some photos that the university had from commencement a couple of weeks ago. We had 250 people, I think, graduate. In the spring, we awarded over 300 graduate degrees in May, which was a record number for us. So we have lots of people who graduate. And so I don't want y'all to be like, oh, this is so sad. I want you to go, okay, I'm aware of these things. Those things aren't going to happen to me. And that will be me in one of those pictures in a future orientation for new graduate students. So now I have one tip that I want to talk about real quick. And it's one tip, it's 2 words, it's Degree Works. So Degree Works is your friend. Degree Works tells you exactly what the expectations are. It lays it all out. And so I want to just very quickly kind of show you how to access Degree Works. I'm not going to leave this and go live with it. I've used some screen captures. And that's my tip. Degree Works is my tip. Okay. So to access Degree Works, you go to My UCA. You can go up here where it says roles right there and click on that and choose student. And then you've got your student roles, or you can do a search and do Degree Works. Either way, you will find a menu button thing that says Degree Works Students. That's you. So you click on that. And when you do that, you're going to have like this worksheet of your degree requirements. Now, this is one that I captured, several years ago. It's an actual student who I believe has since graduated. And when you're on the internet and you're looking at this, like you can click on things and things like there's drop-down menus that show you these things, but this is a static photo and I'm going to go through some important parts. I'm going to talk about each one of these parts, but just to show you some things real quick. First of all, you've got the 2 different GPAs. So remember, I talked about the overall graduate GPA and then the major GPA. And right here, this person's overall graduate GPA is actually higher than the program GPA. So that tells me there's some extra classes out there that the student has done well in. But where's my arrow? There it is. There's other sections to this I want you to see around the concentration, what we call the fall through section, insufficient, and over the limit. So I'm going to blow each of those areas up so that you can just see some things. So here, if you click on that area in your degree audit, it pops up and it shows you some of kind of the bigger requirements. And you can see here that this is a 32-hour program. This student has completed 7 of the credits that are required so far. And it tells them they're meeting this minimum GPA, and it's looking at this one right here for the degree. Then this section opens up, and again, all of these are tailored to whatever specific degree you're in, so they're going to all look different. This particular program has some proficiency exams, and you can see those right here, and they tell her, oh, you have met these, see the green check marks. You still need this one class in music, it's still there. And also you need your concentration requirements. So that's like a whole nother section, but you see how everything's laid out. You see right here, there's that GPA. So we see that the classes that count towards the major is where this GPA issue is coming up. Let me just slide my sheet over and look at this music concentration again. It is laying out everything that you need. Even in the electives, it's telling you what the different classes are that you can choose from for your electives. You should not have to ask your advisor, what do I need to take? It's all in here. Now, there are a few programs where you and your advisor put this information together. You put what's called a plan in there, but then once that's in there, this is your path to graduating. Now, here's where this stuff gets interesting and why you want to make sure you're checking your degree audit. This is a class, it's sitting in fall through. So fall through are classes that maybe could count towards the degree, but for whatever reason, they're not. This one, I don't know why it's sitting in fall through, but if this student looks at that and goes, hey, that's supposed to be counting towards my degree, then you go and talk to your advisor, and then they call the graduate school and do work it out so that it's counting and being applied to the degree. So it's always important to look in fall through. This insufficient section, this is what's messing up her grade. See the F there? So those are going to be classes that you've made a D or an F in. So they're being factored into that program and overall GPA, but they are not going to count towards the degree. So that's your insufficient section. Hopefully all of you have a degree audit that does not have an insufficient section at all. And then over the limit, so let's look at that. These are all the A's that this student had. Look at all those A's. Why are they sitting in over the limit? Well, it's probably because of their age. Do you see that? They're like from 2013, 2014. And I pulled this audit in 21. So they were over that 6-year time limit. So this is probably a case where she needed to talk to her advisor to come up with a plan for finishing this degree and ask, request for an extension, explain the circumstances to see if she could get an extension so that those classes could actually count towards her degree. So see, by looking in her audit, she could see, oh, wow, I'm on probation, because she would be at this point. But the problem is these classes that I have A's in are not being counted towards my degree. I need to talk to somebody about that. I've got a class in fall through. I need to talk to somebody about that. Everything you need to do to complete your program is outlined on these pages. And if you have a faculty member who tries to hand you a checklist of classes, tell them, no, thank you. I'm using DegreeWorks because that is what the graduate school is using, and it represents the most up-to-date version of the degree that you will have to complete to get your degree. So DegreeWorks is your friend. So that was my one tip. Here's my one note, and then I'm going to be ready to hand this over to my two panelists that have been sitting here patiently. Here's my one note. Graduate students do not, sorry, I was blocking my words. Let me try that again. I can read, y'all. Okay, here we go. Graduate students withdraw because they fall behind, not because they can't do the work. That is what we know from research around graduate students and how they progress in their programs. It is not a case that a person who's been admitted to graduate school cannot do the work. What happens more times than not is that they start falling behind as life gets in the way, work gets in the way, overcommitments, family obligations, etc. Graduate school tends to kind of get bumped to the back burner. And then suddenly we're too far behind, we can't catch up. So that is my one note, and I would want you to think about that, because the lesson there is stay on top of things and don't fall behind, because we have complete faith that if you stay on top of things, you'll get it done, and pretty soon you'll be crossing the stage at commencement. So before I turn this over to Megan and John Scott, in terms of graduate student support, I do want to say a few things. Wow, this is a really busy screen, but let me just point out some things. Number one, folks in the graduate school, we are here to answer your questions and work with you. Now, we have phone hours, so we don't answer the phone all the time, but our phone hours are from 9 to 10:30 and 1:30 to 3, and you can call during that time. If you call outside of that time, you'll be leaving a message. You can email us anytime, and email is typically the best way to get in touch with us. But anyway, we are there. We want to work with you. If you have any questions, please reach out. My email's right there, so that if we get to the end tonight and I don't have a chance to answer everybody's questions, or if you think of something later, feel free to email me. And if I don't respond within a day, just email me again. It just means it fell down the list and I can't see it anymore. I do encourage you to follow us on social media. We have UCA Grad School, which is on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. And we put information, we put things out there like deadlines. We try to connect you to different events that are happening and so forth. And then I want to strongly encourage you to find our podcast, which is called Grad Chats with Dr. B. It's available anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's on Spotify, Apple, Google, all those places. And this is a series of like their interviews with students and faculty from UCA, where we talk about things that are important topics for graduate students. So it's specific for graduate students. And I have a lot of fun chatting with people. When people listen, they come back and they say, you know, the information is very helpful. It is a homegrown, homemade podcast. So you can expect some distortion in the volume. Some are better than others, but the ideas are solid. And I want to encourage you to find the podcast and give it a listen. We'll be releasing a new season over the course of the semester. And the last thing I'll say is last year we had the highest graduate enrollment at UCA ever. We had 1,919. I'm hoping we break that this fall. I don't know if we will. We could. It's a possibility. We're trying to get 1,919 followers across our social media platforms. If everybody tonight, like if everybody right now went on social media and followed us, there are 257 of us here right now. If we all followed, we would meet that goal of having 1,919 followers. So please do take a moment, follow us on multiple platforms. That way you get counted more than once. We want to meet that goal, but we really want to connect with you, hear from you via social media, and give you the information you need to be successful, because we are so glad that you are inspired to come to graduate school. See, this is me connecting to our tagline at the bottom. You are inspired to come to graduate school. We want you to be empowered while you're here. And then we want you to feel accomplished when you finish and go out into the world. So I'll leave it with that. And so now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn this over to John Scott.
Okay.
It's all yours, John Scott.
Thank you, Dr. Barlow. Okay. So appreciate everyone being here. Welcome to UCA. I'm the graduate student support GA. I've been doing this since 2020, and I'm pleased to have a collaborator, a partner here in this project. I'm going to introduce Megan in just a second. I'm going to talk about some different things today. I'm going to talk about the basic background of this position, what we're here to do. I'm going to talk about why this is important. And then I'm going to go into some specifics about a particular stressor related to graduate school, which is the imposter phenomenon. You may be familiar with that. I want to really break it down and make it very clear what that is and what it's not. And then at the very end, I want to give you some ways to contact me or Megan. And I'm also going to plug Grad Chats with Dr. B one more time. And I think it couldn't hurt to get on Dr. Barlow's good side by going ahead and following us on all those different platforms and getting on the podcast and listening to the podcast. So I do urge you right now to go ahead and do that too. But once again, my name is John Scott Kelly, and I'm in my 4th year in the counseling psychology program, which is hard to believe. It does go by very quickly. And like I said, I'm very pleased to have Megan DiBenedetto with me, and she's in her 1st year in the counseling psychology program. So it's like a double for me. I get her with me in this position and in the program. So it's great to have Megan. And today, like the main thing I want to try to stress is what the position was created for. So it was, like I said, created in 2020, right when I came in the program. It was COVID. And Dr. Barlow wanted to have a position that really tried to emphasize mental health and try to have that as part of the campus culture. And that's what this position is in part designed to do. So there's a strong mental health component, but I'm also here, and Megan's here too now, to answer any questions you have that may be related to other things. It may be related to stress in grad school, but it may be you have a question about how to gain access to a particular resource. I'm here for that as well. But so again, I urge you to, I'll give you contact information at the end, but you really can email us with any questions you might have. And today, in the theme of what Dr. Barlow was talking about with awareness, I want to shed some light on some different ideas and some different statistics related to well-being, specifically in graduate school. So I have a few polls as well. And here's my first one. For those of you who are the graduate assistant webinar, these are going to look familiar, but for other, these are really important. So I wanted to go ahead and go through these again. So the first one is, what percentage of graduate students reported experiencing stress-related problems that interfere with their academic performance and well-being? 2 to 12%, 13 to 23%, 24 to 34%, 35 to 45%.
John Scott, do y'all see the poll?
I don't. I don't know if it was because I was sharing. There it is.
There it
I
goes.
see it now.
Okay.
The percentage of graduate students experiencing stress-related problems interfering with their academic performance and well-being.
All right, we're up to almost 80% votes. Give folks a few more seconds. And all right, I'll close the poll. We hit 90%.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the majority is seeing picking the higher end, and indeed it is 35 to 45%. And what's noteworthy here, it might seem like a relatively small number, but a key word here: interfere with your academic performance. That word interfered is really important. So it's not just stress that comes along with being a graduate student. It's the amount of stress, the impact of stress that actually gets in the way of some of the main parts of being a graduate student, including academic performance. And then there's the well-being aspect as well. And they appear to be related. It suggests that we can help facilitate academic success by improving well-being. And that's part of the reason why this position was created. I have another poll too. For this one, self-reports of anxiety and depression are blank among graduate students compared to the general population. 3 times lower, equally as high, 3 times higher, 6 times higher.
All right, folks are voting. That's good. We've hit the 70% mark. That's good. Votes are coming in. I'll give people just a few more seconds. And in the poll and share the results.
Okay, so 3 times higher, getting the majority. Appreciate all the engagement. So many people out there tonight. And it actually is 6 times higher, which is kind of hard to believe. When I saw this, I was really struck by it. 6 times higher for anxiety and depression compared with graduate students compared to the general population, which is a huge difference. And we already know that anxiety and depression are relatively high in the general population. So that says a lot about what graduate students are experiencing. Again, really highlighting the purpose of why this position was created. And I actually have 2 more, but this is the last one for a moment. What percentage of graduate institutions reported having a campus-wide plan, vision, or mission statement that specifically references the mental health and well-being of graduate students? 24%, 44%, 64%, 84%.
I wish y'all could see these votes coming in.
I do too.
Like it's exciting on my side. We've hit 80% response rate. So let's see if we can get a few more. Give y'all a few more seconds. And I'll end the poll. We're at 86%, 87. End the poll and share the results.
Okay, so 24 getting the most. And yeah, it actually is 24, which is, again, kind of hard to believe given the statistics from the previous polls. So we have this preponderance of stress that's interfering with academic functioning and well-being, a high rate of anxiety and depression compared to the general population. But then, interestingly, only 24% of graduate institutions actually address this, specifically within the graduate student population. And that is something that UCA didn't want to be a part of, wanted to be part of boosting that number up, increasing it from 24%. And we created this mission statement related to mental health in the UCA graduate school. It goes like this: The UCA Graduate School strives to create an academic community that values mental health in a manner that facilitates the success of graduate students. And this is a major mission of ours in the graduate school, what we've been working on. It's why I've been part of these orientations over the past few years, trying to infuse mental health and well-being into the different initiatives that the UCA Graduate School undertakes. And with that, I want to talk about the imposter phenomenon to kind of boost awareness about this construct and to help students manage it more effectively, because it is a very common occurrence. And the first thing I want to say is that you may have heard of the imposter syndrome. And there's a distinction made here where people are shying away from that, trying not to use that kind of wording because it makes it seem like it's some kind of illness or or a clinical diagnosis. It's not a clinical diagnosis. It's really best construed as a type of experience, this phenomenological experience. And so that's how it takes some of the stigma out of it as well. So that's what we call it too. That's how we're going to refer to it. And when talking about the imposter phenomenon, you may have a sense of what that means, but I want to get into the specific details of how it's described. There are different models for the imposter phenomenon, what it means, what it entails. It's typically construed as a cycle. And there are, again, various different models that have different numbers of factors, but there are three main ones. So I'm going to have a description and an example for each of these. The first one, and they tend to go in order, is feeling like a fraud or an imposter, hence the name. The sense of not feeling a sense of belonging or feeling underqualified compared to those around you. An example of this might be if, we all talk to ourselves from time to time or have these thoughts, and it might be something like, I don't have what it takes to be here. You may look out and see other people who seem more qualified than you, seem like they are more integrated in the community than you. And so there's the first sense that there's something different about oneself. And then comes this fear of discovery. So given the fact that one feels like a fraud, there's a sense that, well, at some point, another person, a peer or colleague or professor might discover the student as a fraud. And then with that, there's a lot of stress associated with that possibility. So an example might be something like, if they knew who I really am, they would kick me out of the program. And that type of thinking is reinforcing the previous feeling of fraudulence. And then the last one is really important. It's externalizing success rather than internalizing it, rather than attributing it to oneself. So this is particularly important in graduate school because there's a lot of success involved in getting to graduate school, being offered a spot in a program, graduating graduate school. There's a lot of success there. But what happens is when it's externalized, it just reinforces the previous experiences. So it might be something like this. Sure, it worked out this time, but that's just because I got lucky. I might not be so lucky next time. So since the success is associated with luck, it then makes the feelings of fraudulence stronger, and then the fear increases, and then there's maybe an increased likelihood of externalizing success, and the cycle continues over and over and over, and it gets more and more difficult to manage. And before I go into some of the ways to manage the imposter phenomenon to reduce those feelings, I want to talk about some things that have been associated with the imposter phenomenon that may not be part of what people think about when they first hear the word or think about it. And an important aspect of all of these too is that imagine what this might look like in graduate school. And a lot of these happen quite frequently. So I'm not going to go through each of them in detail. I have them all listed here, and this is a busy slide, but since it's recorded and going to be put on YouTube, I went ahead and just put everything on there. But a few noteworthy ones are perfectionism, and you can see where this might seem like a good idea, a good strategy for the imposter phenomenon, because, well, if it's perfect, it might not get criticized, not be something that one says to oneself, and it seems right, but then it creates this very, very high standard, this very high rigid standard that increases feelings of stress and anxiety, can actually exacerbate the imposter phenomenon sensations or experiences over time. It's often associated with a high achieving attitude, which again is relevant for graduate students because there's a lot of achievement that is part of becoming a graduate student and succeeding and graduating graduate school. And then I'm going to go ahead and just skip down to the end with burnout. And basically, all of these different experiences take up a lot of energy. There's a lot of inefficiency going on. And part of what can happen whenever these feelings are managed is that person becomes more efficient, more successful, and that well-being increases. So I have one more poll before I get into some of these protective strategies or management strategies. So for this one, across professional settings, prevalence rates of the imposter phenomenon have been as high as 7%, 32%, 57%, 82%. So this is across all different types of settings. It's not just graduate school, it can be any kind of professional setting.
So our votes are coming in. I'm coming in on 80% response rate.
Great.
I had a text message come in. I'll close the poll and share the results.
Okay, 51% at 82, 56. So no one's thinking 7%. Okay. And that's right. It is 82%. 82% is such a high percentage. And I have to credit Dr. Barlow with this comic strip over on the side. But it goes along so well with what the imposter phenomenon experience is really like. And what's really, you could say, interesting about this high percentage is that one hallmark of the imposter phenomenon is that it feels so unique to each individual. But then it turns out that 82% of people across professional settings have the same experience of uniqueness. So I do want to talk about some protective strategies. And I want to put the imposter phenomenon in slightly different terms to help this make sense. So it can be seen as a type of discrepancy between how one is one's own perceptions of self versus the perceptions of others. What tends to be the case is that personal deficits are highlighted while the achievements or the seeming achievements of others, seeming qualities of others are accentuated, exaggerated, overly positive. So the idea here would be to try to reduce that discrepancy. And this can be done by adding context and also shifting focus. So first, on the context front, you start with contextualizing yourself. And one way to do this, again, the idea of offsetting some of these negative beliefs about self that are contributing to the imposter phenomenon, would be to recognize your own expertise. You were admitted into a program. We're all here for a reason. We all have been successful to some degree. Everyone has strengths to bring to the table. And to remember that can be very helpful for trying to reduce that discrepancy and bolster one's sense of self. Another way could be self-compassion. And there are actually three parts of self-compassion. The first part is what a lot of people think of when they think of self-compassion. It's self-kindness, being kind to oneself, saying positive things to oneself. But there are two other factors as well. One is common humanity, acknowledging that one's own experiences are part of the collective human experience. And that's particularly important for something like the imposter phenomenon, because again, it feels so unique. But then it turns out that, well, as much as 82% of people experience the same thing. And the last one is mindfulness. This involves a non-judgmental stance towards oneself, and also just really cultivates a sense of acceptance. And I'm going to plug this again at the end, but I did a season of mindfulness last year, and it's on Dr. Barlow's podcast, Grad Chats with Dr. B. I believe there are 5 episodes on there that can be accessed at any time, and it can be helpful for both reducing stress, but also shifting mindset and with respect to oneself. The next thing would be contextualizing peers. And so what I don't want to suggest is that there's no need to tear other people down. That wouldn't be the goal of contextualizing peers. It's really quite the opposite. It'd be to engage with peers. What happens a lot with the imposter phenomenon is that other people are seen in such favorable terms, but they may not really be known to the person. They might just be ideas of how their person is perceived. But to be more connected to peers or even professors to help form a professional identity, can help add context to that person and help them be seen in a different light. It's also been shown to be very helpful, or reported to be very helpful, to have honest conversations with any kind of trusted individual about the experiences of the imposter phenomenon. So this could be peers. Again, it's 82% of people across professional settings, even professors, but it can be people outside of the academic setting as well. Anyone you feel like you can open up to and talk about those experiences. And the last one I think is important too. It goes along with this idea of the power of ideas. And a lot of people, and I'm speaking from my own experience, imagine the people that they look up to in the field as being professionals from the time they were born, basically. Like for me, I have psychologists that I revere, and I look at them and I'm like, wow, it seems so natural. It seems like they just always have been good. That's just simply not the case. Everyone started as a novice at some point. Even these pros, these masters of the craft, had to start somewhere. And when it comes to shifting focus, it can be helpful to have a process-oriented rather than a perfection-oriented attitude or stance. So when it comes to growth, it has past, present, and future positions. It has to be some kind of, it's growth in relation to something. So by looking back and acknowledging where you've been, and also acknowledging how far you've come, you can have an idea of where you want to go in the future, and that puts everything in a perspective. And that can help pull oneself out of that feeling that things aren't so good here in the present. And another kind of shift in focus could be to look at difficulties or even failures as opportunities for growth. That's really the case. People learn very well about when things don't go as well as they'd like to. Those can be really important learning experiences. I want to take just a moment here to mention that Dr. Barlow is going to be including a survey in the follow-up email to tonight's orientation. And I would really appreciate your participation in this. It's a way for us to have more information, have a better understanding of what it's like to be a graduate student on campus at UCA. And this informs the initiatives that we undertake in the graduate school directed towards mental health. So again, I highly encourage you all to participate in that, and it will be included in the email, the follow-up email to this orientation. But if you have any questions about that, any concerns or anything you want to ask me anything about it, I'm about to give you some contact information, and I urge you to do that as well if you're on the fence. You can email me, and it'll also reach Megan at gradsupport@uca.edu. And if you'd like to talk more about the stressors of graduate school, we can also meet for a virtual meeting. And it's important for me to say here that I am a licensed therapist, but these are not therapy sessions. But if it turns out that you'd like to go to pursue therapy sessions, I can also direct you to the UCA Counseling Center. I also have an account on X, and I have updated Dr. Barlow to X. It was Twitter, unfortunately, on some previous orientations, and that's at UCA Grad Support. And I try to post things that are relevant to the graduate school experience. I follow a lot of different departments at UCA, but then also post some things at mental health if something that new information emerges there, something that I think is important that could be helpful for graduate students. And then one last time, I will plug Grad Chats with Dr. B. And it's not just because I've been a guest a few times, even though if you want to listen to those, that'd be great too. But we have so many great topics that are covered on there. Dr. Barlow has talked to so many people. We talked about the imposter phenomenon specifically, and that was a conversation with graduate students, I believe 4, and they just talk all at different levels of their respective programs, first year, second year, so on. And they just talked about their experiences openly, and that has received a lot of positive feedback. But then there were many others. Burnout. I did the season of mindfulness, like I mentioned earlier. There's one on networking, gratitude, nutrition, various deans across different colleges, and so many more. There's so many episodes in there that we did. Dr. Barlow was so busy last year recording so many podcasts, but now there's all this great information. So once again, urge you to go check it out wherever you find your podcast. And that's it for me, Dr. Barlow.
All right. Well, we do have some questions in our Q&A, so I'll open this up. If you have questions, please feel free to add those. Take just a little bit of time. It looks like we've got about 6 minutes to try to do some of this stuff. So first question is, where do I access my virtual course sessions when we do meet? So most courses are going to be handled, the online courses themselves are handled through Blackboard. Sometimes people in the College of Education are using Google Classroom. Sometimes I don't know if they're using Blackboard for their meetings or if they're using Zoom or so forth. So the answer to that is, the best thing I can say is contact your instructor for more information that's specific to your particular course. But that's a good question. And just because there's so much variety, I would say contact the instructor. The next question I have is around when I talked about the 6 credit hours for improving the GPA. And the question is, does that include that repeated credit? Yes, it does. So like that's student who was that Fran in that scenario. So she had to repeat the class. So that was 3 hours of that 6 that she had to potentially pull her grade up. So yeah, that's counted. Next question, will I wait until the first time my classes meet to find out which text and codes I will need for class? Or is there somewhere I can find this info aside from bothering my professors about it? So some faculty, well, it'll be in the syllabus, right? That's where you're going to find all this information. Some faculty will put that syllabus in Blackboard. I'm not sure when the Blackboard shells are opened up to students, but you can log into Blackboard and see if that information is there. If your faculty member's not using Blackboard, like I said, in some of the College of Education courses, they use Google Classroom. They'll have to send you that information about that so that you can find that. But that's what you're looking for, is the syllabus. Some put it in early, some don't. So let's see. Are summer sessions required in the graduate program? So there are some programs that run year-round. And so they do have summer courses that are required. That's not true of all graduate programs. And so that is a question that you'll want to ask of your program coordinator. So every graduate program has some faculty member that's designated as the graduate program coordinator, and that's the best person to answer those types of questions. So if you're not sure who your program coordinator is, you can always look in the graduate bulletin, but I know that's not somewhere students go and hang out to find information. So you can also contact the graduate school, or you can email me. I'll tell you who it is. Okay. This question is, do grad students at UCA get 10 counseling sessions per semester? This is at the counseling center. This question was raised last week.
Mm-hmm.
It is 10
yes,
per semester,
it's
isn't it?
10 per year.
Oh, 10 for the year.
But when I was working there, and someone else mentioned this in the previous orientation, they do tend to work with you and figure out, maybe they go a couple more, depending. It kind of depends on where it falls in the semester too. But if not, if more long-term therapy is sought, they can provide referrals to places that are generally really close and offer low rates per session. They try to really take that into consideration as well. But it is 10 per person per year with a little bit of wiggle room.
Okay, thank you. For those of us who are 100% online, may we still access the graduate school services mentioned here tonight? Absolutely. So that's why we do these webinars virtually. The podcast, you access on your own. John Scott and Megan are available for virtual meetings. So all the services and things that we do for graduate school, we try to make that all open to all students, regardless of where you are or what program you're in. This one says general advantage and disadvantage for international students. I'm not sure what the question is there. So I'm just going to leave that there and ask that student reach out to me separately to share like what your concerns are or questions maybe. This next one is, what is the best way to register with the Office of Accessibility Resources? So that office on our campus was just recently renamed, and their acronym is OARS. It's the Office of Accessibility something. So it's OARS. So I'm sure if you go on their website, you'll find information about next steps. You also, I'm sure, can call them. to get to speak with somebody about those next steps. If you get into that and you're not sure, like if you're not getting responses or whatever, you can reach out to me and I'll try to connect you with someone. But just take a look at their website, get that information, and give them a call. Let's see. So this one is asking about, like, we've shared a lot of information about imposter phenomenon, mental health, self-care for graduate school. Are there other links, resources, virtual classes, webinars, etc.? And are there additional resources targeted at non-traditional graduate students? So, I mean, I'll say that we have covered a lot of related topics in the podcast. Like John Scott, I've probably interviewed 3 or 4 times in the past 2 years, specifically about imposter phenomenon, but then also about other ideas. He's done I've gotten old and I just lost the word, mindfulness. He's done the mindfulness sessions. He has some mindfulness sessions that are on our YouTube channel, but also in the podcast. We have the whole season with that. He's picked topics that then I've interviewed people about. So really the best place I would say to get started with some of that information is in the podcast, giving those a listen. All of that is information that's specific to graduate students in general. So we try to, talk to students who are on campus full-time, part-time students, older students, younger students. We try to have a mix of the people because we recognize that there is no single profile of what a graduate student is. And there's a lot going on. And I'm specifically remembering some conversations with a parent, like how do you balance your family with all the school stuff? So there's a lot of really good information that targets graduate students wherever you are, like however you're navigating that world. Let's see, I'm past my time, but let me just scroll real quick and see. This degree works over the limit is usually classes that are over the time limit. So, right, if you have 6 years to complete your degree, DegreeWorks is using that 6-year mark to mark classes that are too old. So if you start the program in 2023, but you've already taken some classes, we're going to go back about 6 years and those classes will count. But then before that, they're going to be too old. So sometimes things start falling in the over the limit, the section, and we just need to have a conversation about should we pull them in. Sometimes they're just too old to begin with, and so they're not counted. But that's the over the limit section. Oh, here's a good one. Do we have Graduate Student Appreciation Week at UCA? You bet your bottom dollar we do. Graduate Student Appreciation Week is the first full week of April every year. And so we are already launching the planning for that. Each year it gets bigger and bigger. Last year we were able to give away giveaways that week to a whole bunch of people that total value of over $1,700. We hope to surpass that this year. We had online activities for our online students. We had on-campus activities for others, lots of great things. So yes, I think I'm going to end there on that really positive note. Apologize for not getting to all your questions, but do know that if you have questions that I didn't get to, you can send those along to me in an email, and it was abarlow5@uca.edu. So thank y'all for being here. Again, if you haven't followed us on social media, please do it, because we really want to break that record of 1,919 with our social media followers. Thank you all. I hope you have a phenomenal semester. And when you see me, give me a shout out and say, hey, Dr. B, and I'll say, hey, I hope things are going well. Y'all have a good evening. Thanks, Megan. Thanks, John Scott.